This morning's reading is courtesy of the Internet and the United American Indians of New England. In Boston on October 10th, 2020, protesters marched in an Indigenous Peoples Day rally as part of a demonstration to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. Fast forward to October 10th, 2021. For only the second time, a U.S. president has officially recognized Indigenous Peoples Day in and of itself and not a replacement for the Columbus Day holiday. President Biden issued a proclamation to observe October 10th of that year as a day to honor Native Americans, their resilience, and their contributions to the American society throughout history, even as they faced assimilation, discrimination, and genocide spanning generations. Indigenous Peoples Day is a holiday in the United States that celebrates and honors Indigenous American peoples and commemorates their histories and cultures. It is celebrated across the United States on the second Monday in October and is an official city and state holiday in various locations. This year, the date was Monday, October 13th, 2025. The National Day of Mourning originated in 1970 when Wamsuta Frank James, a Wampanoag leader, was invited to deliver a speech at the 350th anniversary of the Pilgrims landing in Plymouth. Organizers rescinded their invitation after learning James intended to speak candidly about the suffering of Indigenous peoples. In response, James and other Indigenous leaders established the National Day of Mourning, turning Thanksgiving into a day of remembrance and protest. Thanksgiving, widely regarded as a celebration of harmony between Pilgrims and Native Americans, obscures the violent reality of colonialism. The arrival of European settlers marked the beginning of a genocide, mass displacement, and cultural annihilation for Indigenous peoples across the Americas. At its core, the National Day of Mourning is a solemn remembrance of Indigenous ancestors and their sacrifices. Participants fast from sundown the previous evening until the afternoon of the event, reflecting on the suffering endured by their forebears. The gathering is also a platform for political activism, connecting historical atrocities to contemporary issues such as environmental destruction, systemic racism, and ongoing colonialism.
In doing my research for this sermon, I found out about that, and I chased it down. The Wamsuta James from, it was the Aquinnah Wampanoag, and I brought the whole speech. I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to leave it up here and leave it to the church. For those of you, it's a really good talk, and anyone who would like to look at it, please, or use it as your sermon in the box or whatever. And they even had some pictures of him. But he spoke the truth, and they wouldn't let him. So I said, damn it, you can speak your truth, and I'll bring it right back home. That's what I did. My gift. Oh, another gift. I'm like this. My Transylvanian basket. I was waving this around this morning, and I made these as gifts for the church to go on your Christmas tree. In origami, if you invent a fold, and you can name it. If you can name it, make it, you can teach it, you can name it. And I call these better angels. And it all came from my seeing a beautiful display of origami angels in a cathedral in England. And every damn one of them was white. And I said, why are there no brown angels? And so I got shopping bags, and I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked until I found a way to make this angel. And then I made them out of shopping bags, I make them out of recycled paper, and they're better angels. So you have some better angels. Now my sermon. And so I ask, how do we make amends for ancient egregious wrongs, or even new ones for that matter? Let's start with our own history, like I did with the telling of the story of Wamsuta's speech, Martha's Vineyard history, that was canceled because the sponsors of the Thanksgiving parade that year thought the truth would dampen the spirits of the cheery, merry parade watchers. Duh. I would ask you to look at the two pictures in your order of service. This recently erected, beautiful sculpture stands in front of King's Chapel, an historic Unitarian Universalist church. It stood on the corner of Tremont Street and School Street since 1686. It's one of the oldest churches in Boston and one of the 16 official stops on the Freedom Trail. But as of September 4th, the facade of the imposing stone church changed. On its south terrace, passers-by will see a larger-than-life statue of a black woman draped in regal white. She sits on a pedestal holding a metal cage, and from that cage, birds fly free. The monument, entitled Unbound, was crafted by Harmonia Rosales in partnership with the Massachusetts Design Group. It was 10 years in the making. The powerful bronze figure honors the 219 people known to have been enslaved by past church members of that church, that Unitarian church, and their ministers. The entire meaning of the word unbound is we are not tied to the past, said Rosales. Our past is not just of bondage. It's not just of enslavement. That's not where our history begins. It's only one chapter. And then she added, my friend, we've always had wings. In doing this, King's Chapel seized an opportunity to serve as an example to other historical organizations around the city. It is actively working to uncover and repair the violent and damaging elements of its church's history. The placement of a 14-foot sculpture of a black woman directly on the Freedom Trail is one way to say she was here too. This memorial is an act of resemblance and a call to action, says the Reverend Joy Fallon, senior minister at King's Chapel. We honor the dignity and legacy of those whose names were long erased, and we commit to walking a path of truth, faith, and repair. A couple of days ago, I posted this story along with the image of the sculpture on my Facebook page as a point of pride for my denomination and as an example to others. Most of the responses were positive. One was not. A well-intentioned woman, wrote, "This is a lovely monument, but you must do much more. Your website mentioned the historical research concerning slaves in Boston, which is important work. I am dismayed that you are not using your considerable expertise to track down the descendants of the enslaved. That would seem like the logical next step. Your church was made rich by the forced labor of enslaved people. Saying sorry and putting up a lovely monument owes far more than that. How great would it be to admit guilt and pay compensation?" I thought on that for a while, and 18 hours later, I replied, "Hi, please don't shoot the messenger. Ouch. I posted this as a UU minister who is an admirer of both the sculptor and the sincere efforts of a proud congregation who is owning their history and doing something public about it. That and the sculpture is staggering in its meaning and in its beauty. If you feel this strongly, I encourage you to take your message directly to the worthy people who are doing their best to right an old wrong." Amen. But this raised a question for me that I asked in the beginning of this sermon: just how do we right an old wrong? or even a new one for that matter, how much atonement is enough? And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Familiar words to many, but how often do we, or did we, when we recited them over and over again in many of our Christian childhoods, did we ever really think about the forgiveness of sins, of making things right with friends and colleagues, a family member we might have wronged, and most of all, most important, making it right and forgiving ourselves? That's a pretty tall emotional and spiritual order. But like every journey that begins with a single step, the journey of self-forgiveness begins with yourself. It's a good idea to start local. I say that because when things are right inside yourself, you'll have the moral courage and fortitude to move beyond yourself and do more. You'll know what you are doing in trying to right the wrongs in the world beyond our front door. Our Jewish friends and colleagues recently observed the most holy of holy days, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. In Jewish tradition, on Yom Kippur, observant Jews are supposed to fast and pray and think about any wrongdoings they might have committed, and then find a way to atone, to make it right. This should not be limited to Jews. How about everybody? How about myself? Where and how does the atonement happen and the forgiveness begin? If I have done something that hurt another human being, knowingly or unknowingly, I believe my duty is to face that person and honestly admit my wrongdoing, careless or deliberate, to atone for the act, and then to honestly ask for forgiveness. That's not Christian or Jewish or Hindu or Muslim. It's universal. In the 12-step program, we, and yes, I just said we, Overeaters Anonymous for me, part of what we do on our path to recovery is to list our wrongdoings, those things we did when we were in the clutches of our demons, the dumb, stupid, unconscious, hurtful things we did. And then when we know what they are, we make a list, and then we earnestly make our amends. Mend it, fix it, make it right. In a 12-step program, in a human life, you can't always do this. The person may have died, refuses to meet with you, whatever. Something you have broken is unfixable or irreplaceable. What you, we, they can do is make a symbolic one. And I tell the story of a friend who was a flight attendant years and years and years ago, who was in my program, who would, on weekends that they had a long weekend in a city, a given city, a weekend stopover, would go into the kitchen of the airplane and help themselves to the little nips that they give out, pockets full of nips so they could have drinks over the weekend and not have to pay for it. Well, she realized that this in fact was stealing, and she didn't like it. But what was she going to do? Walk up to and kneel down in front of a plane and say, "I'm sorry," take on Delta Airlines? So she said, "No, I won't do that. But what I will do is," and she did, collected some money and made a sizable donation to a charity in atonement for the wrong she felt she had committed. When we carry the burden of a wrongdoing on our back or in our hearts, it can be a very heavy burden. The spirit and the act of forgiveness, of making it right, so often, as I said, begins with making it right with yourself. And ladies and gentlemen, that is no easy task. I believe that King's Chapel as a institution, I'm looking at my notes and I screwed up, as an institution has tried to do with the creation and public display of Unbound. They're telling the uncomfortable truth that they, right here in bright, liberal-leaning, early abolitionist state of Massachusetts, we have had slavery in our recent history. The truth is, many of our own WASP Yankee forebears owned slaves. Many of our Unitarian Universalist churches right here in New England, Cohasset and Second Parish in Kingham, to name two, had separate seating for slaves of the members of the congregation. Those churches are still there, and those seats are still there. I've sat in them. I've preached in them. We can't go back and change history, but we can make good history going forward. We can do our best individually and collectively as a congregation or as an organization like the military, higher education, the church, even and especially the government. We can do our best to make sure that the enslavement and subjugations of human minds and the suppression of human voices does not happen on our watch. Does not happen on our watch. We can do that. In Jewish tradition on Yom Kippur, if you as an individual have honestly admitted your transgressions, owned your responsibility and asked forgiveness and offered to make it right, you are good to go. Even if the apology isn't accepted, you did what you could. You did all that you could. You have a clean slate. But sometimes the person who needs most forgiveness is yourself, myself. I am genuinely sorry for allowing such and such to happen, for looking the other way, for making an exceptionally poor choice, for saying yes, or for not saying no. I want to be able to forgive myself and move on. Beating ourselves or someone else up for not doing better at atoning, like the person who questioned me on Facebook for an action I didn't do, but only reported, is not effective. The wouldas, the couldas, and the shouldas, you know about that. I would have done this, I could have done that, I should have done that. They're ancient history, but they can continue to be a litany of self-denigration, accusation, self-pity, if we let them. Like we do in the 12-step program, make an inventory of that within yourself that needs forgiveness and is holding you back. Then talk it out with yourself or a trusted friend or a counselor, or write an honest letter of forgiveness to yourself. Read it over a couple of times and agree to the terms that you set for yourself. And then I've got this in bold print, let it go. You have done the best you could, and if you need help letting it go, get it. The shame, the guilt will no longer have any more power over you. You are in control of that. As individuals and as a denomination, we can't go back and change the wrongs of the past, but we can learn the truth about them and make damn sure history doesn't repeat itself. That is our job going forward, personally and as a society. And I'm going to read something. It's edited down as the closing of my talk today. A sermon written in 2017, by Risha Groner for Yom Kippur. Truly, am I forgiving myself? Am I sorry for what I have done? Or sorry that I have allowed myself to be so driven by guilt? And so I begin by forgiving myself. I forgive myself for procrastination, for perfectionism, for never believing in myself as much as others believe in me. I forgive myself for judging, assuming, or naming another human without fully knowing their situation. I forgive myself for judging my own thoughts and deeds too harshly, or letting other humans judge me, and carrying those feelings with me for far too long. I forgive myself for staying quiet, and for being too loud, and for not knowing what to say when it was at the tip of my tongue and I was just too scared. I forgive myself for not being perfect all the time and forgetting that I'm a work in progress. I forgive myself for not always listening and for believing that the only way through this whole mess is to smash it all down, when perhaps it is with compassion and generosity we can heal and rebuild ourselves and the world we live in. Think on all of this and go gently into the world. May it be so.